Good evening and welcome to our kickoff webinar of 2022. I'm Stuart Young of Commit and I'm the MC for today's webinar. In just a moment, I'll hand you over to David, who will intro the panel and the session. But first, some announcements. Thank you on the, excuse me, 1 second. Before we get to the questions at registration, I'd like to give you some information regarding the questions. As we go through the session, the presentation, please do ask your questions using the panel on the right-hand side. You can type those in and send them over. And one other thing, I've got a couple of links in there, one for the LinkedIn group and also for the website. If you could maybe take a look at those who haven't looked at them already. On to the questions. Thanks to all that participated in this. We asked, would you like to know more about what BIM4 does in industry? 74% yes, 16% no, 10% not sure. And the other question is, what other areas would you like BIM4 to cover? There's a whole host of things to go out there, and we will look at each one individually. There's a bit of crossover, or a bit of overlap rather, and there's a couple of questions that if there's time at the end, I've coloured those in yellow, we'll ask those questions to the panel. Still on the questions, we have some multi-choice poll questions in the session, and just to whet your appetite, here's the first one, and this is definitely a curveball, so just bear with me a second. When I can get the thing on the screen, I have the first question. So, where is Thomas the Tank Engine housed? At Ian's house, in Middlesbrough somewhere, the Science Museum in Manchester, or the York Rail Museum? Oh, 100% at Ian's house, apparently.
It is, definitely.
I did say it was a curveball, so there's a clue in there. Go on, there's only 29% voted so far. Come on, click those clicks.
There's a technology test at the start.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. It's still at Ian's house. Goodness.
Okay. Well, there might be, but you need to clarify, is that the real Thomas the Tank Engine, or is that everybody's one they got as a child?
No.
I mean, everyone's...
No, that's the real Thomas the Tank Engine.
Right. Okay. Because that was quite a lot of answers for where. You know,
I think we got some savvy listeners. Okay, I'm going to close that up now. Nearly everybody's voted, and I'm going to share that. You should be able to see that on the screen. So 43% Ian's house. Nothing for Middlesbrough. Never mind. 14% the Science Museum in Manchester, and 43% the York Rail Museum. Well, I think those that have seen Thomas the Tank Engine will know it's at the York Rail Museum, unless it's moved recently. Ian, can you confer?
That is true. The only one at my house belongs to my grandchildren.
Okay,
and that's
there we are.
And just to not to leave Middlesbrough in the shadows, it is actually a great port for importing trains, and many's a train that come into this country come into the port of Middlesbrough.
There we are. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Thanks to everybody participating in that, which was practically everybody. I'm now going to pass you over to David, who will intro the session. I think he's got a safety moment to deliver. David, over to you. Let me just I didn't realise it was.
Oh, thank you.
1 second. All yours, David.
Okay then, all right, let me just open that a minute. Okay, everybody, so a very quick safety moment. Effectively, it's the 2020 rule for looking after your eyes. So the idea is that after 20 minutes of working on the screen, you just look at something that's 20 meters away. So it's very simple, nice and easy to remember, and that will help you keep your eyes in good order as you're working through the day, and especially as we're on Teams and and other types of technology, rather than all being back in the office, although I am today. So great. So I just wanted to say thank you all very much for attending the first live BIM4Rail event that we've had for well over 2 years. It's been a real pleasure to host this, and to continue to provide support to our members of BIM4Rail, and obviously enjoy the benefits that BIM can provide. We've got Barry Gleeson from Wood Group, and we've got Ian Shumble from Network Rail, who'll present an update on the development of BS1192 PAS Part 6, Health and Safety. So specification for collaborating, sharing and use of health and safety information with BIM. So really important area for us, specifically in railways for HS2 and others. Yeah, very important going forward. And then we'll also include an update on the status of PAS and the recent efforts that a number of people here have been doing to provide additional guidance on implementing PAS. Then we'll have a bit of another bit of a poll, and then we'll finally then move to a couple of events that we've got planned. So I wanted just to give you an update of that. We've got one in June, which is Asset Management BIM in the Digital Twin, and in September we've got ISO 19650 guidance. So last couple of things really is to ensure that you sign up to the LinkedIn group, and we're also spending a bit of time now getting the website updated as well, because we've had a few difficulties with that, but we've now got into that. And I just want to say thank you then for Stuart and Commit for supporting us with that website and putting together today's session. So I'd like to say over to Ian really to take us away with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the one I want. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Jolly good.
The blank desktop. Now there it goes. Perfect.
Yep. Always start with a blank desktop. So good evening. Health and safety matters, and the information requirements that specify our health and safety deliverables are very important. But I'd like to begin with 3 thank yous. First of all, thank you to Commit, our hosts for this evening, not just for this evening, but for all their work as a centre of excellence for our industry. Thank you to BIM4Rail Group for their continuous efforts of making BIM real for the benefit of UK rail. But mostly thank you for the BIM for Health and Safety Working Group, who have provided most of the material for this evening, or my material, I should say. Oh, move on, that's it, yeah. So the BIM for Health and Safety Working Group is chaired by Gordon Crick of the Health and Safety Executive and supported by Andrew Rouse, Steve Coupling, Peter Nichols, Steve Williams and myself. The original purpose of the group was to create a bridge between PAS 1192 Part 6 and the ISO that will eventually replace it. The document that has been produced by the team has, in my opinion, exceeded their original goal. So a little history. The BIM for Health and Safety Working Group was formed in late 2015 and chaired by, and still is chaired by, Gordon Crick of the HSE. One of the main drivers of the group was the government's BIM mandate and the need to increase awareness of how health and safety and well-being should be incorporated within the project information. The challenges of PAS 1192 Part 6 were, as always, language. Should the language be health and safety, BIM language or project management language? How should the PAS be hosted and managed and by who? The aim being to maximise the use of guidance to improve the management and controls of health and safety matters within a BIM world. And that is without losing key important factors of regulations, people's skills, knowledges and experience and competencies. So quite a tall order. To help with this, the group started to focus on a set of golden rules or questions that on starting a project or piece of work could be asked to confirm what level of support is needed and what level of maturity is required. These 10 plain language questions were intended to help address the challenge of getting clients involved and giving them the confidence and competence to know what they should be asking. At the time, there was quite a lot of flack towards clients that they weren't providing adequate requirements. So January 2018 saw the publication of the ISO's 19650 parts 1 and 2, which superseded BS1192 2007 and PAS 1192 Part 2. So that began our journey towards international standards instead of just British standards. 17th of April that year, the PAS 1192 Part 6, entitled Specification for Collaborative Sharing and Use of Structured Health and Safety Information using BIM, was launched at the Institute of Civil Engineers. And the two things in that title that stick out for me are collaborative sharing and use of structured information. Following the launch of the PAS, the group started on the journey to generate the first set of guidance that was issued in August 2018. The first and key challenges was around raising awareness within the client community. There are also other BIM4 H&S groups working with professional and educational institutes, looking at things like the BIM Risk Library. And in 2020, the publication of the ISO Information Protocol and ISO 19650 Parts 3 and 5, and the increase of terms such as OIR, AIR and PIR, the group started to realise that there was a need for an update of the guidance, and that is the main focus of what we're trying to achieve now. So last year we produced the guidance. It hasn't been published yet. It's intended for publication in May this year, I believe. And a community of practice to share design risks, and the PAS 1192-6 ISO review should come about 2024, and we should actually get to the point where we've got an ISO rather than just a bridge towards the ISO. So the aim of the document is to produce a clear set of guidance to the client or the appointing party. Again, we got the language. Do we use BIM language, contractual language? I prefer contractual language. I think to move over to ISO 19650 speak would just confuse people. So we could deal with that with glossaries of terms or something. To clearly articulate project information requirements in a way that is useful and usable, using plain language questions to enable clients to understand and prioritise key health and safety issues, and linking those plain language questions to a maturity matrix that both baselines and signposts the client. And wherever we find ourselves on that journey, to be able to action structured health and safety information according to our maturity. And hopefully that will incentivize us to continue onto the holy grail of having one source of information. So the contents as they stand today, which require another thank you, which is to Andrew Rouse of the Environment Agency, for collating opinion, authoring, editing, re-editing, and then re-editing, and then re-editing as more opinions come in the guidance. So a big thank you to Andrew. The purpose remains to specifically help clients build the necessary requirements required by law and governing bodies. And it's really stressed in the guidance that it is the client who needs to do this and take responsibility, and goes on to demonstrate how this can be done and what is needed to achieve this. So the client needs to set the information requirements. The client should arrange a meeting near to the inception of a project, and with their CDM, principal designer, information manager and health and safety advisor as a minimum. And in this meeting, the PIRs, project information requirements, should be established that meet the needs of the hazard and risk profile of the project. And you'll note that hazard and risk is part of health and safety, and we often just talk about one of them and ignore the other, depending on whereabouts we are in the project. At Network Rail, we have some standard sets of PIRs, but not all PIRs will be needed on every project. And in some cases, the client may need to supplement the provided list with specific PIRs of their own for that specific project. And the PIRs set out at a high level, and at the beginning of the pre-construction phase, a framework for managing risk information throughout the project, right up to completion and handover of the health and safety file. So from pre-construction, before we even start thinking about design, I would say we need to be thinking, what information do we require on this project? So the right information to the right people at the right time. Always a tricky one. We tend to give too much information to too many people all of the time, or not any information to anybody any of the time. A risk with BIM methodologies is that a vast amount of the digital information can be generated, and alongside the PIRs, we really need to have firm and robust information standards, and development of these are absolutely essential. This defines what information is important, what information is required, what needs to be kept, what needs to be immediately accessible, what can be filed and what can be archived. In this way, PIRs can be focused on specifying what is the right information to be provided to the right person at the right point in the project, in the right format and in the asset of the building life cycle. And the benefits of this include improved communication, predictability, avoidance of rework, repeatable success, enhanced visualization, better evidence, better coordination, digital rehearsal, early analysis of hazards. So then we come to the information workflow, and that's strategic, high level and detailed requirements which feed into each other in a continuous cycle. So you have the organizational informational requirements that feed both the asset information requirements and the project information requirements. And both of those are used to generate exchange information requirements. And exchange information requirements can be operational projects or can be capital delivery projects. And we're finding more and more that those two different types of EIR are being specified. Once you have your overall project exchange information requirements, which is really a letter to the contractor to say, this is what I want contractually delivered, they can then be split up into various subsets of the EIR for disciplines or task groups. That then defines the deliverables, as I've said, and they become the information models that are delivered to us and complete the cycle by informing the as-built AIR. And so we can continue around. So the information requirements chain, The requirements of CDM can be well described at high level by using PIRs. And a PIR is a set of high-level information requirements defining the project needs, partially created from organisation information requirements, as I've said, or partially created from a combination of the OIR and AIR. OIR provide a high-level description and purpose, and the PIR whereas the AIR provides the specific asset information for the project. PIRs tend to be focused on information that the client requires at key decision points during the design and construction project, and hopefully enable timely evidence-based decisions based on information. And those decision points need to be considered in building up your project information requirements. What decisions do I need to make at what point in time so that I can get through each stage gate? Now, the BIM4 HSE working group have also contributed to the UK BIM framework, and you can find it in the guidance part D, developing information requirements, Annex B. There are some really good health and safety examples. High-level glazing, asbestos, and one that I'm about to come on to. So this is a worked example. I chose this simply because it fits on the screen easier. It's well worth going and looking at the other ones. So if you remember back to the beginning, the original intent for the BIM4 HSE group was to aid clients to build project information requirements. And this example and the others on the UK BIM framework far exceed that because it's the whole cycle of the information requirements, and we really need to be looking at that rather than focusing on what the individual requirement is. So the policy is set to be an example organisation for health and safety. So the OIR reads, the organisation needs to maintain information systems that enable the identification and tracking of foreseeable elevated risk of design, installation and operation. This needs to be done at the earliest opportunity. Treatment and management of these risks shall be to an exemplar standard. This then feeds into the AIR and PIR for high-level specifications, and then into the delivery and operational EIRs to define contractual deliverables, which are then refined by level of information need at each stage of the project cycle. So first of all, you get this OIR, which feeds into the others, and you've set your requirements, and then you say what's being delivered at this particular stage, and that is dealt with by your level of need, your level of information need. So the team came up with a list of PIRs to reflect the PAS 1192 Part 6, 19 of them. The question there is, how should we apply these consistently, and are there any others that would be useful to be included? These are I would say the list of must-haves. Yeah, if we go to 12, maintain a design plan. We must maintain a design plan for our health and safety. There's also a certain amount of crossover, possibly with other project information requirements. Number 10 is specifically for health and safety, maintain a table of health and safety information shortfalls and gaps. And it's very useful starting to think about these and reflecting on what is it that I actually need for my project now. And there are 10 plain language questions within the guidance. These are, if I pick on number 4, have you specified reviews at key stages to enable collaborative working and feedback on risk management? These reviews should be led by a CDM principal designer and involve the client, designers, safety professionals, end users, principal contractors, and contractors. In health and safety terms, these reviews will be key to identifying sources of harm in the project and to ensure risks are, where possible, eliminated or otherwise reduced and treated. It's really amazingly useful to have plain language questions that spark off that initial meeting that we all need to have at the beginning of our projects. And these 10 plain language questions have been put into a maturity matrix that relates back and measures progress in 3 levels that we've named first steps, keeping up with the pack, and taking the lead. Well, we all need to make those first steps, and hopefully we will be keeping up with the pack. There will be some people that will want to take the lead, but not all of us. Some of us have the risk averseness of being on the bleeding edge and would rather be on the up and coming curve, and that's a fair choice. But I think keeping up with the pack is where we should be aiming to be as a minimum. And you will obviously get these slides, so you'll be able to read through these. And Gordon Crick, the chair of BIM for HSE, has said that he's happy to send out draft copies of the guidance before May, when we're going to publish it, if anyone's interested. So where am I with all of this? If I can impress 2 messages upon you, they would be this, which is number 1, health and safety really matters, and how we state our requirements will determine what we get. If I go into a cafe and ask for a cup of coffee, and it turns up with an instant coffee with milk in it, and I actually wanted a cappuccino, I'm at fault because I didn't specify what sort of coffee I wanted. And the same goes with health and safety and all other requirements. If we don't specify what we actually want, then how can we expect to get it? My second and a really important point that I'm learning myself at the moment is, do not invent anything new. It is already there in your organisation. It probably isn't in a BIM format yet, but if you look close enough, you will find it. So my role is focused on BIM for capital delivery. On the right hand side, the bottom bit, the PIR and EIR. But I still need to consider the other bits because they inform my process, and my deliverables go back into the cycle. So NR have PIRs and EIRs. We have an AIR, we don't call it that. We call it the MADA, the minimum asset data requirements. And that's the other thing. Maybe the thing in your organisation isn't named the same as the ISO 19650. Is that important? That Shakespeare didn't think so. But where are the OIRs? Do I need to invent one? I've already answered that with my emphatic no. So my OIR come from regulatory bodies. So the question is not where is my OIR, but how does my organisation answer the regulatory requirements? So I've got the managing health and safety and construction, and I've got Office of Rail and Road, their strategy for regulation of health and safety risks. So I'm reading those and I'm going to the people that better know than I do in the organisation. So how do we answer this? Where do I find the answer to this? And by that I can build up what an OIR looks like. And that's where I am really at the moment, because this last bit of the slide shows how everything contributes and how it goes round in a cycle. And so whatever we produce is going to go back into the asset information model, is going to go back into the asset information requirements, and are going to inform our next projects. So if we can improve our information requirements, we can improve our information deliverables. I'm starting with health and safety. I'm really looking deeply into this and giving myself a headache sometimes, but it really is worthwhile doing. And all I've got left to say is thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Ian. I'm just going to hand over to Barry now. Barry, are you ready?
Yeah, thanks. And I'm going to share screen, and you can make sure I am. Screen. Right, brilliant. So look, Ian, thanks for that. It's great to get an update. I was involved back in the days in the Health and Safety Group with Gordon. It's a great group. It's done fantastic things. And what I'm going to show you now is an example of where we've actually done this in reality. And effectively, although I worked in the rail industry for 9 years, 3 years ago I joined Wood, and I've been working nearly exclusively in other industries, a little bit in the rail industry, but actually one of the great things about health and safety is it really is common. And this example, I hope, will play to all the things that Ian talked about and make sense to everyone. What's important about this and what's important about BIM4 is what's called making it real. So about 2 years ago, this project, and I'll explain a bit more about it, went through the process of implementing PAS Part 6. And it doesn't have the new guidance, but it will show you over 2 years the impact actually using the original guidance has had on the project. And I hope you find this interesting and also kind of something that will help you in the future. There's a lot of information here, so I'm not going to go through it all because I'm going to get through it fairly quickly. But the idea is there's enough slides in here to help you walk through it. To give you a bit of context, the facility I'm going to talk about is the North London Heat and Power Facility. It is a very significant facility. It is the second largest waste authority in the UK. It covers quite a sizable portion of London. It actually manages 3% of all UK household waste, serves 2 million people. It is one of the oldest waste plants in Europe, and it was certainly due an upgrade. And what's interesting is it's an organization which is actually trying to minimize waste, protect the planet, and preserve resources for future generations. So it's not all about collecting waste. It's actually about informing the community how to avoid it. So Ian's point about most organizations do know what they want to do and do have organization information requirements based on principles. So it's quite an interesting project in itself. The site is operational, and one of the big challenges on this site is we've got to move from a live plant, which is servicing 2 million people, to a new plant inside the same site without closing it down, right? And that is quite a challenge. It's very interesting in the railways industry. There's very little new build. A lot of it is rebuild within the existing operational environment. So very similar challenges. And just to give you the context, there are existing plants and energy from waste facility, incinerators and composting areas, and these will be replaced by brand new facilities, creating a space in the middle of the site where they will then decommission one of the giant energy from waste facilities. So it's actually a 10-year project, and it's gone on longer than that in terms of design and concept, and there will be a future eco park with an emphasis on bringing the community in, and I'll show you a little bit about how important that is. The vision is incredibly powerful, I think, for a project of this nature. So it's to create a waste management facility which the local communities take pride in, demonstrates value, and is a model for public sector project delivery. And I will return to how important that vision has been in implementing health and safety and lots of things on this program, but it really is powerful when you set out with a goal to be a model project. And I know Ian talked about keeping up with the pack is important. Well, this project certainly set out to be leading as best it can, and I'm going to talk about that. Why is it important? Well, it's a public sector client, just like rail. Now, I think social corporate responsibility means it hardly matters too much whether it's public sector, but in the UK, most of the capital spending and the operational spending actually comes for the public sector. And these are some of the strategies the government has put out. And without doubt, this project is trying to achieve those. So data for public good, benefits from BIM, PAS Part 6 is the one I'm going to talk to today. You've got the construction strategy, and then you've got the social value toolkit, which again is very important because it's a community style project. So all of these things are in play on this project, and all of them tied together. And I'll focus on one of these, but they're all interconnected. One of the first things we did was we took the guidance and we had a kickoff workshop. And the plain language questions that Ian talked about, that guidance was actually relatively recent. On top of that was incredibly important to start off. The other thing that was really important here was the project manager for this, who didn't profess to be a BIM expert, I'm going to name Ian Cox, was actually wholeheartedly committed to this. So from the vision of the program director, Dave Cullen, to the project managers doing the job, they were committed to health and safety. And when they heard there was a BIM PAS standard to implement, they were keen to get it done and get it done well. So there's lots of information here. I'm just going to leave you this as an example. This was the Kickoff Agenda. It's very good, well set out and well structured by the project manager. And everyone was invited to attend this, and it was all part of a collaborative work. We have a one-team approach on this project, which includes contractors, the client, the owner, the advisors. Everybody gets involved, and we had a BIM working group from the very outset. And this was one of the key objectives in the BIM execution plan to get this running. And it was well thought out. There was an issue statement, like a problem statement, and an outcome statement. So we were clear on the purpose of what we were trying to do, and that was, often taken from the guidance itself. So it's very easy to use this guidance and turn it into something you can use in a project. And that is what making it real is all about. So some of these examples you will have seen Ian talk about, I'm going to talk about how we kicked off with those as a kind of a baseline, and then what impact it had on the program over the last 2 years, and hopefully where we're headed going forward. And this is one of the key things that was in the PAS itself, the structure of organization information requirements. And Ian actually knew people in ARPS who were involved designing the document. He actually brought them in to talk to the group, which was again fantastic to conceptualize this. But what was really important, I'll draw you out to the end here, which was the end user. And each person in this chain, from client to end user, have a kind of a cycle around using, identifying, and sharing information. And underpinning all that is a project common data environment. This is where BIM kind of brings into its own, because it's a requirement of BIM that there is a common data environment for all these users, and it's controlled and information is shared, which is mentioned a few times. So this was conceptually how information should be organized, and how important all the participants were at the very onset of the project to understand that the information in the data environment was going to get used again and again. And in fact, inputs for what was needed are needed at all stages from all of those participants, which was what the working group set out to do. Inside that then is a core objective. So there's a client strategy, clause 6.2, really good, really simple, really short. So very easy for us to pick up the standard. And before we did the workshop, we went through the documents and we picked out how we were going to approach it. And that identify, use, and share cycle was really important in allowing us to do a baseline assessment. So I'm going to tell you, this is literally taken straight from the documents. And now I'm going to show you what we did to actually get the system going with just an assessment. Because again, as Ian pointed out, every project does this. We've been doing health and safety, and really we've been improving that for at least 2 decades, maybe 3 now at this stage, way beyond where it was in the 80s and the 70s. And so everybody is doing stuff, even if you bring in PAS Part 6, it's not, you've just got to start fresh. You've got to understand where you are first. So I'm going to talk to that. So the plain language questions were the first thing we set out on the agenda. And as a group, we started going through these one by one. And we did, as Ian said, use the example of the assessment. So we actually took something from the BIM task group in the UK, which is not to make it too difficult to do. So we didn't want to do a heavy audit at the start. We just wanted to do a very simple assessment from people on the project, from the health and safety team to contractors. Do we have evidence of this? Is it verbal evidence that we're talking about it? Is there work in progress actually written evidence? Is it used and shared on the project? And is it published as business as usual? So that was a very simple assessment, but it was important to get us moving and get us moving reasonably quickly to understand what we had. And we used the examples that Ian pointed out: first steps, keeping up with the pack, taking a lead. And we basically created a table of all those questions, and we went through the examples, and then we went through and described what we were already doing in these spaces ourselves, and we assessed how well we were doing it. So the next slide here plays the register, which actually came out of the workshop. Again, I'll share this, because this is, because of the information that's available in the guidance, you can convert this into something that's usable really quickly. And we went through each question, and we went through each kind of maturity, and we asked ourselves, what are we doing in the project that looks like this? And then we give it a ranking at the end as to how good it was. So we weren't getting top marks at the start, of course we weren't. And for each of those, from an information perspective, we had an accountable lead. It was often the project information manager, because they were kind of overseeing the CDE, but it was then into the actual project and CDM and project managers actually as to where the content and where the improvement was going to come from. So I hope this is kind of a useful, as to not to be afraid to take on the standard, but actually it's very easy to convert into something you can use. And again, it's irrelevant to the sector you're in. To me, this would have worked on any project I'd ever been on, but we gave it a go here, and it was quite powerful. And once we did the plain language questions, we also decided to look at the next element, which is the identify, use, and share concept. This is more around the enabling tools. And again, you know, once inside the guidance, there's quite a strong list under each of those as to what tools you might be using in each of these sectors. So we literally just took that, put it in a table, applied the same matrix, which is relatively simple to do once we kind of assessed it and learned it, and then went through those tools and did an assessment of all the tools in the program, including whether ones we didn't use, whether we thought they were essential or useful or not. And then in each of those, I say this is from the document itself. So for instance, you've got a well-defined employer's information requirements, a design and manage CD, fairly simple stuff to understand whether you do or you don't. And we did an essential, non-essential check ourselves. Not too many came out as non-essential, but it was just useful to understand where we were as a baseline. And again, that came straight from the document, easy enough to extract. This is the table. So actually in the document, there's a list of all those kinds of tools. And we did our non-essential, essential check, you know, and again, collaboratively doing it. So there was some debate around some. And you can see at the baseline 2 years ago, you know, lots of orange and amber and some red. It's perfectly understandable. We're not all leading the pack. We're not using everything on a job anyway, but it was a fantastic way to get a quick snapshot of what we were doing well and what we could improve on, and also a common understanding for everybody on the project as to where we were. So they were the two or three initial workshops. And once we'd done that, then we started then focus on these as a kind of a task group. So the workshop led to a working group, which again is one of the ways the project works. Now, it's quite complicated on big projects. I don't want to scare you with this one, but down here you'll see a health and safety BIM PAS Part 6 working group. We were keen to get this going, but as an example, the project already had a site utilities GIS working group, it had a BIM working group, and there was a digital strategy group, there was an ideas and innovation group. So this was all framed inside, how do we join the dots on this and make sure it's joined up, because innovation is very much part of this, and there are drivers coming from lots of parts of the program. But to have a task group and then joined up, and this could be connected up to the asset management steering group and into the program leadership. So it was important to have visibility and to follow it through. But just to show you, the first thing it led to believe was we should have a focus group on how you implement this, and it should be joined up in the program. So that's my first recommendation for people. If you're going to do the kickoff, is then how are you going to task and action that stuff and make sure it says joined up with all the initiatives that are related. The next impact, you saw there was a utilities group. You know, as ever, this is one of the biggest risks when you start a project, underground services. You know, it's a global challenge, and it's no different than any major program like this, particularly with a plant that's 20, 30 years old, and we're going to rebuild it from now within the existing operational boundaries. So we did actually do an early focus on GIS and a tool to understand. We had some challenges. You'll see here a table on the right talks about utility strikes, uncharted services, and we added in things like disconnections because people felt on site there was quite a lot of information in the information system. The question was, how can we access it better? How can we understand it better? And how can we make people recognize what was happening? So this tool became partly lessons learned, partly awareness, partly an enhancement for the way people on site could look at things. And this was kind of shared. It was worked up in work groups with people on site. The app was made available, and it looks simple enough, but actually it's not. You know, it's something you have to do. And because we had that workshop and that vision, it was something that the program, the engineering assurance team, encouraged us to do. And this is an example of a tool that was developed and then reported on. And this is just an example of disconnections. So the same tool that was used to manage uncharted services, they suggested, why don't we use it for disconnections? And the app itself allowed you to put in photographs, capture the certificate. A lot of this stuff is in the CDE, but this makes it more accessible. So this is an example of kind of following through from the idea of share, you know, use and identify into actually making it practical on site. And that was really important that people could see on site. These things were starting to come into reality. This one's extremely important. This is information. So there's a company called Safer Sphere as an advisor on the program, and they wanted again to make sure site teams had access. So inside the canteen, you have news boards which have safety advice attached to it, and you had actually hard hat media was used for touchscreens on site, so people could go around and interact with the information, which is possibly coming from the CDE and places like that, but it's more accessible to all users on site. Another example was really important. This was actually a site wearable device for health and safety. So it was actually recommended in one of the innovation rounds. A guy got an award for suggesting it, and then lo and behold, not long after he suggested it, along came COVID. So with Commit and a company called Be Able and EMS, the program actually brought an innovation program to use bracelets to track distance and keep safe distance. It was a trial run with the contractors. It was run with everybody on site, and it was really, really informative. And it was a kind of culture that showed that the client and the organizations, everybody was going to participate in safety. And although this was then wound down in the end because COVID was kind of wound down by the government, we could argue, and there was really direct feedback from people on site as to how this kind of behavior and follow through made a difference. And we had some of our graduates talking about what happened and explaining the impacts of this and lessons learned. And also, you know, the benefits of doing these kinds of things for health and safety and making it real for users. We had a risk register from Harm Zero. So they came in and they built a risk register which actually had the ability to link to systems. So we developed a proof of concept around linking to the models and then making the hazards. So we talked about, Ian mentioned elevated risks and future operator risks. So some of this is still a work in progress, but the fact is people were thinking this way and acting this way, to me, meant it was a model project. And actually we were starting to do the things in the space of taking the lead from the position of just assessing where we were. And I think this is a really good example. And I know there are examples like this around, but just to, you know, just to spark it, that it can come from different sources and different people, and it actually can come together really well. So I'm just going to wrap up there. There were some fly-through examples because we did this. I'm going to say my 3 points I want to kind of bring back to you is that the PAS itself provides brilliant guidance on assessing what you're doing already. And that is really good to know, because it's not like we've got a whole new thing to do. It is something. BIM was always what was best practice, what we were already doing before, but with a slant on information management and digital tooling to enable it. The second thing is you have to coordinate and communicate this with the end users and the needs and get feedback and buy-in. And that is the kind of collaborative approach on the program, which was really important from the BIM working group to the different working groups to engaging the contractors and the advisors. And you can't underestimate that. People doing things in a silo and producing tools on their own generally are not going to have the same acceptance and impact as if you do it together and you come up with a plan together. I think the last point that was really important to me was the safety leadership vision and culture. You know, looking for a model project, the objectives talking about everyone's safe, the public can be protected, the operations can function, and that it's everyone's job to stay safe and get home safe and protect each other on site. It gives people the space then to come up with these ideas and to follow them through. So for me, implementing PAS Part 6 from the plain language questions is actually quite impressive and quite a useful way to go step by step and to get into a culture where we're doing it now almost as a way of working, and everybody understands that it's part of health and safety to be productive on site and to be safe at the same time. So look, I'll stop there. Thanks for listening there. Sorry that was a bit fly through, but I'm conscious of time. And I'm happy now to pass back to Ian. I suggest we're probably going and Stuart, we're probably going to have a few questions. I hope that wasn't too much of a download. The slides are there for your information, so I'll pass back now.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Barry. That was a really good run through and very explanatory as well. Thank you. I just want to now launch the remaining poll questions, if I may. Let me just hide the previous ones and bring in the new ones. Sorry, you shouldn't see the previous one. Right. So in relation to PAS Part 6 and applying it on projects, are you, and there's 3 answers here, should be able to see those now. Are you aware of it, understand how to apply it, applying it in part or full already on your projects? I take it you can see that, can't you? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's nearly everybody voted. I'll close that up and share the results. We've got a well, 3 more to do after this one. So let me share that. 75% aware of it. Nothing understand how to apply it. Applying it in part and full already on projects. So guys, any comment? Anybody want to jump in and make a comment on that? David? Ian,
I mean, I'd say, yeah, sure. I'd say I'm not surprised, and it's great people are straight up and honest about it. So brilliant that you're aware of it, and I hope from watching this, actually, it's not so daunting to have another guidance document to apply. And as Part 6 has 6 standards, and I do think because it wasn't in the original ISO, it might have been considered the poor relation. So maybe its birth was a bit more difficult than it should have been. But I would hope after seeing this that people would think actually it's not that difficult to apply, and hopefully more would start to apply it. But yeah, I suppose I'm going to say I'm not surprised, although, you know, I would like to see a much higher uptake.
Okay, Ian, any thoughts to add?
Yeah, I think that with a lot of these things, an awareness is necessary. Whether you're applying it on a project or not, you wouldn't necessarily be aware of that if somebody else has set the requirements. So it would depend where you are in the project.
Okay, great. Well, let me close that one out, and go to the next one. So in relation to the ISO 19650 and PAS Part 6, who do you think is most important to its implementation? Should be able to see that on your screens now. So is it the clients, is it technical advisors and consultants, contractors, the contract itself, or the subbies?
And I guess I'd add, I know some people would like to tick more than one. So this is deliberately designed not to allow you to do that, and see if you can suggest someone that's more important. But I do realize some people might want to click all the boxes. So in this instance, maybe just try to think who is the most important in your mind, accepting you might want to say everybody. But for now, let's just see who you think is the most important. If you had to pick one, it's quite difficult.
Okay, I'll close that one out, and you should be able to see the results now. So 43% the client, 14% technical advisors and consultants, 14% the contractor, 29% the contract itself, and sensibly not the subbies. Any thoughts, guys? Ian, do you want to jump in first, or are you on the fence?
Well, I would definitely agree with the 43% that say it's the clients. The contract itself should point at the requirements, but it is the client should be setting the implementation.
Okay, Barry?
Yeah, and I think that plays to the story in that you've given around, you have to ask for it, right? It's like your coffee story. So the client has to tell us what you want, but you've got to write it down. And I think that's a very savvy interpretation of, in my view, the way it has to work. It's everyone's responsibility, but somebody's got to do it. And I think led by the client and written as requirements is a fundamental way to start. And that was the same in our project. PAS Part 6 was in the BIM execution plan for the client, and we sat down and then we worked it out. So how you do it is another thing, but should you do it, absolutely the client is in the driving seat.
On to the next one. All information deliverables are verified and validated against the information requirements, and it's strongly agree, partially disagree, strongly disagree. You'll be able to see that now.
And is that, just for clarity, is that in reality, or is that an aspiration? Are we asking people what do they see, or what do they want to see?
Ian?
Well, I would say on your projects are all information deliverables.
Yeah. So are you seeing this on your project? Are we validating these against the information requirements? You might have projects going, what information requirements?
Okay, is that enough time? Everybody done? Yes. Okay, let me close that and share it. You should be able to see that now.
I'm not surprised. I mean, we know what we should do, but reality is we've got a bit to go.
Yeah.
And nobody disagrees, which is fair enough. So I think that's an honest view of the world, which is good, because this is about the real stuff, and not the theory of what we could do, but what we actually do. Yeah. Personally, I think that's honest feedback.
And the final poll question, I'm just conscious of time here. Our project requirements include health and safety information as a deliverable. And again, agree or disagree? Okay. Everybody's voted on that now. So let me close that. Oh, wait a minute, what's happened there? Okay, should be able to see that.
That's quite good. I'm pleased with that result. I mean,
Yeah.
again, back to my coffee example. I mean, this would be if I sat down in the cafe and didn't order anything, but expected a cup of coffee to turn up. That would be even more poor than getting an instant coffee.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, well, thanks
And
for everybody. Sorry, Barry, go on.
I was saying, partially, that's quite high actually. So maybe there's a bit to do yet, but that's fine. Again, it's better to be honest.
Yeah.
That's the first base.
Yeah.
I think that in general, with our information requirements across the whole of the construction industry, we are still learning how to specify properly specifically for information requirements.
Yeah.
No, these are twins a good example. All right, so I'd say on time, Ian, or Stuart.
Yeah, we've just got a chance for a couple of questions. Thanks for those that sent them in. So one question here, and Barry, I'm going to aim this at you. Do you think implementing the PAS improves or disimproves productivity?
That's a really interesting question, and I'm going to say my experience in this project, and COVID is a good example. We introduced this app, and at the start of COVID, we had very little downtime. And I did experience with other projects quite significant risk and downtime because there was just uncertainty about how we could keep people safe. Now, there was some time for sure lost in this, but it's a major program. But I've seen it, and I've seen it in lots of cases. Everyone knows the impact when things go wrong. The impact is massive on productivity. And I do think, at Network Rail, the previous CEO, he was productivity and safety go hand in hand. You cannot be productive if you are not safe. And exactly. So my belief and what I've seen is that is actually true. And if you don't think it's true, think about a time when something went wrong and then think what happened next. The best thing you say about safety is you've never had an incident, therefore you don't notice it anymore. Yeah. But I do think if everyone thinks back in industry and of an incident, you can see the impact, even in morale. I mean, just doing some of these things, actually, people's morale was better that somebody cared. So my view is it is strongly the case, and retention and kind of, the culture and the feeling of your staff is as important in what you do and how you do it. Sometimes the results of productivity. Yeah.
Thanks, Barry. Conscious of time, I want to bring in Ian and David here. How mature is the rail industry now with BIM? David, do you want to come in? Are you there, David?
Oh, well, we're waiting for him.
Yes,
I'll come in. And I'd say it's very much a mixed bag. Some areas we're really mature. I mean, you'll get some of the major projects will be steaming ahead of what the rest of the organisation can cope with. Then you'll get some of the smaller projects that haven't got the purse strings to pull on, and it is sometimes just down to money, to buy in experienced people that can actually bring up their maturity. So it's a very mixed bag, and trying to get that level playing field means that the people that are more advanced are feeling held back, they're feeling reined in, and the people that are less advanced are like, oh my God, I've got all this work to catch up with. So it's a difficulty with such a large infrastructure to say where a specific maturity is. Sure.
David,
no,
any?
I think that, sorry, can you hear me,
yes.
guys?
Yes.
Yeah, hear you now, Dave.
So I also think, it's also down to, I think, the supplier organisation as well, especially with new projects or renewals, is how mature and how advanced they are in using BIM or indeed the digital twin. And obviously that has an impact on the information and data that's sent over to the end state organisation. So it's all in our interests, I think, to ensure that we embrace PAS Part 6 and ensure that we have that leadership of health and safety, because, you know, happy people do good jobs and safe people do as well, of course. So very important there.
Sure. We're just over time. Have we time for one more question, Barry? We've another question here, which I think has got your name written on it.
Go on, fire it out quick then, and then we'll leave it Dave to thank everyone again. And well done everyone for staying with this, because I appreciate it's after 6. Go on, quick one.
Do you think access to information on BIM-aligned projects is still an issue? I.e., can all the supply chain and parties involved find and access the health and safety information and tools fully?
It is still an issue, absolutely. And you know, I've showed you some good examples there, but when we test users and we go to them, the evidence is that it doesn't reach everybody, and there's a bit to go, and it can reach people, and then they're not always able to use the tools, and sometimes the systems and the technology can actually put people off. I mean, on that Be Able example, we had challenges about people couldn't charge them. There were USB chargers. And it's like, guys are going, I don't have a USB. You don't carry a laptop around. You know, it's a simple example we didn't think about, right? So yeah, there's absolutely challenges, and that you have to go after to make it work. But it's worth the journey, right? That's my view.
Brilliant. Okay. Parting shots, David. Do you want to say a final few words?
Yes. Yeah, I will do. Thank you very much. So thank you very much to Ian and Barry on their presentations there. Ian, I thought, gave a very good example of the importance of defining the OIR, PIR, AIR, and Exchange IR to ensure that we've got that collaborative working within an organisation, and to give that health and safety exemplar. Importance of plain language as well, as obviously I think we all know, and it's important that health and safety matters. We need to be able to go home safe every day. And over to Barry, the great works he's been doing with the North London Heat and Power project, making sure that, you know, the works they're doing is well structured, and collaboration at all layers are absolutely critical, and all understood the needs of PAS 6, using different enabling tools, also using different working groups, and that to make sure there was collaboration across the piece, very important as well. And I think finally, Stuart, thank you very much for being Master of Ceremonies and setting this presentation up for us. And I'd just like to thank everybody who spent some time here on and listening to what we've got to say, and hopefully we get some really good feedback outside of the meeting. So please join the BIM4 group and the LinkedIn side of things, so that we can share best practice and knowledge between us all. So thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, David. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Barry. I will post the video or the recording of this session in the next day or so, but watch out for the next one. We'll notify you through the same route. But thanks to everybody, and have a great evening. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. Keep safe.
Thanks, everyone.